Hi, everyone. We all have a unique perspective that is shaped by our experiences. And with that unique perspective, it comes a special place in all of our hearts, a passion, if you will, to fulfill our calling. And not uncommon, that passion is usually connected to wanting to make the world a better place. And that mission has carried on in many individuals throughout time and history, and from one compassionate individual to the next, as we continue to improve to the best of our abilities our society and culture. Today is a special day for Noah Webster Educational Foundation because we're celebrating our second birthday. My name is Catherine Kent, and I work as the content manager and editor here. And today I get the special privilege of switching seats with Melvin Adams, our founder, and interviewing him for a change so he can switch roles and share his story of how he became the founder and president. And while we have told some of the story before, today we really want to get to know who he is as a person and allow him to share some of that great personality with us. So, Melvin, welcome to your own show.
Oh, well, thank you, Catherine. It's great to be on with you today, and hopefully everybody else listening will enjoy it as well.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's dive in. So, you've been an educator and for many years, and you've been heavily involved in your community and in educational endeavors throughout the international community. But in previous episodes, you've talked about the founding, you've talked about the problems with American education, and every week you interview someone new and explore more of how we can solve those problems and what those issues are that are facing American families. So today, let's talk a little bit more and dive a little deeper into the why behind Noah Webster and why behind this mission to reclaim education. So let's start at the very beginning, to quote Sound of Music. And let's talk about your childhood a little bit. So what was your education like? And how do you believe that your educational experiences as a child and young adult helped share and shape your desire to help children today?
Oh my, I feel a little bit like I'm sitting in front of a school counselor. Uh, no, actually, that's a great question. A lot of people don't know this, but I was born and raised in East Africa. My parents were Christian missionaries. I was born in what is today the country of Eritrea. Most people would never be able to find that on the map, but at the time it was part of Ethiopia. So it's in the Horn of Africa, the kind of northeastern part. And Eritrea is that little sliver that goes right along the northern part, and it's right on the Red Sea, literally across the Red Sea from Yemen, which you hear sometimes in the news. So on the one side, we had Sudan, and then on the other side, we had the little country of Djibouti and Somalia, and on the south would be Ethiopia, and across the Red Sea is Yemen. So that's the part of the world I grew up in. Um, I was clearly a minority in that community. I was a white boy, and so, but you know what? That was home to me. Really didn't know different, and love those people. Love them today, and you know, as far as my own upbringing and education, there were a number of missionaries there, and because uh, because we kind of had our own. A lot of missionaries back in that day used to send their kids off to Kenya or someplace to boarding school. Uh, Honestly, I'm grateful my parents didn't do that. I don't know what would have happened. It could have been a great experience, but my own experience was great growing up at home, growing up with my siblings, and then there were a few other missionary families around that were working in conjunction there in the organization. And so we kind of had our own homeschool co-op type thing, and it was great. We started out with early curriculum, is really focused on is the Calvert curriculum is what it was called back then, that particular one. And it focused on reading, writing, basic math, that kind of stuff. Um, Later on, we went into some other types of curriculum, the early years of accelerated Christian education, experienced a little bit of that. And then because it was a war zone for so much of my life there. Later on, we ended up going to Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Ethiopia, and I did my high school years there. And I attended the Sanford English Community School. It was a British school. Had I believe like 57 different nationalities that attended. A lot of the people that were my classmates were uh, embassy kids or ambassadors kids or people from the Organization of African Unity. The headquarters was there in Addis Ababa. And so, I mean, I had a very diverse, uh, you know, educational experience. My teachers were from England, but my classmates were from all over Africa, from Asia, from Europe, and from the Middle East, and it was a great upbringing. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about them, learned a lot about their cultures and countries, and have lifelong friendships that remain until today.
That sounds like such a fantastic education, and just the fact that you were able to interact with so many different cultures and different perspectives. It's such a broadening of the mind. Really, it is. And in today's culture, where we put so much of an emphasis on understanding different cultures and diversity and things like that. And so to have that background, what a great foundation for perspective to be able to interact with everyone. So, what led from that moment to you where you have this basically international education, right? So, what led from that international education to you being like, you know what? I want to be an educator myself. I want to interact in the education sphere in my career.
Well, actually, that's a very interesting question, and I have to tell a little story here. So, I came to the States to go to college, and I actually wanted to be a veterinary doctor. That's what I wanted to be. I loved animal husbandry. It was very agrarian community where we lived, and so we always had animals, livestock, all kind of stuff, and I loved it, and so thought that's what I wanted to do. But when it was time to go to college, that was long before the internet, and it was like, okay, where in the world would I go to school to be a veterinary doctor? And so I had no idea. No, nobody I knew. My parents didn't know, and so my older sister had gotten accepted into a Christian college in Cincinnati, Ohio, and so my parents suggested, why don't you guys go together? And that way, your transition away from home, you'll both be together. You'll be in a good environment there. And you can kind of get started there. And then from there, you can transition to other things and find something else that, another school where you want to go to. So that's what we did. And because my parents were also very musical and kind of along my family, and we learned music as kids. And so when I got to this Christian college, music was something I knew and had, and didn't really know the fun things was music, right? And so I plugged in there. I ended up getting music scholarships, traveled all over the country representing the college through music. And so my first year was going by really quickly, and I was enjoying myself and my experience and getting a lot of neat things that were going on there. And so I was like, okay, I need to be transitioning over to vet school someplace. Didn't know where that was. But I'll tell you what, there was a deeper thing that was going on in my life. And this is really comes down to some of the real core of who I am and why I ended up doing some of the things I've done and why I'm doing it today. I told you it was a Christian college. I was raised in a Christian missionary home, but I knew a lot about God. I had some spiritual experience, and so forth. But as I was transitioning into adulthood, there was that whole difference in ownership and responsibility around my own faith. What did I really believe? Who was God to me versus, my parents, my family, and everything else? And in that, toward the end of that first year, I really began to grapple with those. I was starting to grow up, maybe is a good way to put it. And I began to understand that I had to have my own core. I couldn't just live off of things that were around me. I had to know who I was, who God had created me to be, what his purpose was for me. Did I really believe in him or not? And all of that. So as I grappled with that, it really led me into a whole different direction. And I really grappled, as much as I still love animals, and some people are not going to understand this statement, but I came to understand that in God's economy, while he created everything, his priority was humanity. People are at the top of his list of priorities. And I began to understand out of that for me to fulfill my purpose in life, I needed to have a focus on people. I needed to love people. I needed to serve people, because that's, to me, what Christianity became all about and is all about. And so I shifted a focus then away from veterinary work to how can I engage with, love, and serve people? How can I help others? And through that, it led me into education, and directly or indirectly, I've been there ever since.
Wow, what a journey, for sure, to have gone and I think it shows a heart if you care about animals, and then now caring about people. But there was that heart throughout, even from high school, of just wanting to care and make a difference and make things better. And it's interesting too, because you mentioned in your story thus far, you've mentioned two things that tie really into our core principles. And I know we kind of had joked around before this interview started, don't talk about the core principles. We talk about them all the time. This is going to be more of a like, grab your cup of coffee and tell stories type of thing. But it just shows where those principles came from, because one, you talked a lot about instruction and the instruction you received and how that made an impact, and the basis that you have even now, thanks to the schools that you had as a child. And then going into college, that faith and morality and core principle really became a big part of who you are. And now, as the founder of Noah Webster, you're fighting for, or not really fighting, but you're advocating for parents to have the right for their families to get to choose the paths to faith and morality that they want. And they may be different from yours, or they may be the same, but that is a core tenet of who we are as an organization, is that we believe that people should be able to have those pivotal moments and interact with their families and have those conversations and that parental engagement. You mentioned multiple times your parents, right? And so having wonderful parents and wanting to help other wonderful parents help their children. So it's interesting to see the backstory really coming together here in your, as you tell us your life story. All right. So as a moving forward now, so we've done childhood, collegiate life. Let's talk a little bit more about your experience as an educator once you chose that field. So we know you worked around the globe as an educator, including starting a college in Europe. So you definitely have an amazing resume here. But when was the pivotal moment between working in education and deciding to really turn your heart more toward educational reform and decide, it's time to stand up and maybe change things a little bit in the sense of equipping families and educators and school board members to reclaim American education? So when was that turn for you?
That's a great question. I think, when we were living in Europe and working there, starting that college, traveled back and forth to the States frequently, And what I noticed, it's kind of like sometimes when you're living in a particular place, life is happening, and sometimes you don't notice little changes that are happening as much as you do when you're away from there. And then you come back in, and it's like, wow, you really, things kind of tend to stand out in stark contrast. And that's what was happening to me, because we lived there for 8 years. And as I would come back and forth, I was just seeing in our schools, in the broader culture, just some really and again, this is the 90s. Okay. I was seeing some significant shifts and changes in what was going on that were alarming to me, disturbing to me. And I really came to the point where I had to decide, okay, am I going to ignore all of this stuff, and am I going to just keep going down the track of life I'm on? It's good, and I love what I'm doing. Or am I going to get my hands dirty? Am I going to start pushing back? Because, it's easy. The easy thing is to just go along. But you know what? Um, there comes a point, if you are a responsible person, whether you're a parent, an educator, a legislator, whatever your role is, there comes this point where you have to make a decision. I'm going to let it go, or I'm going to stand up and push back. And I began to understand that if some of us don't start standing up and pushing back, the things that we enjoy today, the things that we have enjoyed through our lifetime, our children, our grandchildren will never get to experience. And it ties down to core principle things. And that's when I realized, okay, I've got to get involved. We have to figure out how we can push back in a way that is not just it's not an angry retaliation. No, it's got to be around, wait a second, let's create awareness. Let's talk. Let's have an intelligent conversation around what's going on. There are other people that are seeing these things going on too, but sometimes it's like, what's going on? And everybody's asking the question, but where are the answers? And so we've got to dig in, find the answers. And then it's not just enough to know what's going on, but how are we going to bring solutions that people can embrace, that will actually can bring to reclaim, to really to bring positive change, positive restructuring of some things that are going astray. And so that's where that happened. And it's been a process. It's going to be a process, because, this is a moving target. But I believe that we've got some things figured out here. And I'm excited about the momentum that we're finding as people are joining the cause and getting involved in very specific actions that they can take where they are. And we're seeing things starting to change community by community.
Yes, we definitely are. We definitely are seeing change happen, and we're seeing the equipping of others thanks to the resources that we have, and we're able to publish, change people's lives, and they're contacting us and telling us. It's definitely exciting to see people being equipped and empowered. So now that we've brought up NWEF, we're here now, right? We've gotten to that point in the story. Let's reflect a little bit on some of the things. So we talk a lot about the joys, right, of starting a nonprofit and all of that. But let's reflect, or if there's one thing that might have become harder than you thought it would be, or one thing that was maybe a challenge that you weren't expecting and we've worked to overcome that, or in the process of working to overcome that. So tell us something, maybe unexpected and a little bit hard about a nonprofit.
Well, this is not the first nonprofit I've started. I've done several. All of them are hard. It's always hard because you're taking an idea, concept, and you're basically focusing that out to the community and saying, "Hey, are we on track? Do we have buy-in? And do people embrace and then help that to flourish?" I think the thing that took us a little bit by surprise, it took the whole world by surprise, but COVID. I mean, we started this right in a time of COVID. We've, in our earliest years, I mean, we're doing it in a time when all kinds of things have kind of stood on their head. The economy has gone crazy. It's a tough time. Um, and yet, ironically, as I look back on other things that I've helped to start or started, it's almost always in the tough times. It's like that's when things kick off. And then it's like, okay, if it can't be bad, it's going to get worse. And it always does. And we certainly have experienced that here at this organization. But I tell you what those kind of hardships do. They help us find out if we are committed. They help us find out if we are going to be resourceful and if we are going to find ways to work through those difficulties and still succeed. And yeah, we've had some real challenges in the last 2 years. I mean, we launched, 2 years ago? And we did a lot of work prior to that. But when we launched and we expected everything to take off, and then it was like the whole ship started sinking around us. But hey, there are amazing things that are going on, and we're all going to live through this difficult time, and things will get better. And in all things considered, I think things have gone amazingly well.
Yeah, COVID was definitely a challenge for sure. That being said, I'm thankful for it. If there had been no COVID, then I would have definitely not been looking for other opportunities and would not have ended up here. So it, it definitely had personal perks. And I think on the other hand, and you've talked a lot about this with other guests on the podcast, but it really helped parents to understand more of what was going on in the classroom, because while they were working from home, their kid was maybe in the same room or the room next door doing school. And so they could overhear like, oh, these teachers definitely have humongous classrooms that are too large to handle, or there's content that maybe we're not so pleased about, or ooh, I'm not sure about that mandate. So it definitely was a blessing in disguise. So that was a challenge,
Yes.
for sure. What is maybe an unexpected, amazing thing that has come out of it, or come up in the history?
Wow. Where do we start? I think maybe the unexpected amazing thing above all else is what you just articulated. I mean, how could we have communicated any more clearly what's going on in education than what happened, and parents are seeing it for themselves, and teachers are struggling with all kinds of things that they had not experienced before, and all of the transitions and models and things that were forced upon them, and then additional mandates start coming down, a lot of trainings, a lot of things that and it's just kind of all of these things combined have really, it would have taken us, years to get the public's attention over these issues that happen, that the tension is there. Now people are saying, okay, how do we fix these problems? How do we resolve these issues? What are we going to do about it? What can we do? Where are the real issues? I mean, help us understand what's really going on here. And so, I mean, when people are asking questions, it's a lot easier to get things going than when people really don't want to hear what you had to say and don't believe anything you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from my own personal experience in my district, a lot more people began to run for school board. Up until this point, it was not really even a race because only, the one person would run. And now more parents and grandparents that were at home and they were like, hey, I want to get involved. There's definitely some issues here. And more teachers began to speak up and say, yeah, there is. Like, we already were overwhelmed, but now we're really overwhelmed. And there's so many more mandates and so many more responsibilities placed on us. So I think it did do a great job of revealing that. And now people can come together and work together to improve things for our kids. Whereas before, I do believe that they would have, eventually probably seen the light and worked to improve, but it's so many more people faster, right? Which is amazing. So to get back to, I guess, more of a lighter, humorous side, is our namesake obviously is Noah Webster, right? And there's so many clear connotations as to why we would have chosen him. But is there maybe kind of a fun, maybe lesser known fact about Noah Webster, or just something that attracts you to him as a namesake that, isn't just like, oh, well, he invented the first dictionary and he has a great definition of education? What else about Noah Webster can you tell us today?
Well, I don't know how humorous or fun or whatever this is, but I think relevant is a key word here. A lot of people don't know this, but Noah Webster was contemporary with our founding fathers. I mean, he was living, working, and very engaged as a young adult and then as a mature adult, right during our Revolutionary War period, the Declaration of Independence, the all of the things that our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, all of those things, those foundational documents, all of the political upheaval that was going on in our country were happening right during his time here. And so what he saw, and as he was engaged and interactive with many of the leaders of this new forming government and country, um, some of the things that he saw, the various communities and the various states and and the various interests and various languages and all of the things that all of these folk, most of them at that point had come over from Europe and whatnot, and they had their own history and their own baggage and their own stuff that they brought with them. And and as we were forming this new union as a country with new ideals of freedom and liberty, and as he was looking at that, he was really an architect in helping to say, look, if we're going to have real liberty, there are certain components that need to go into making sure that everybody has that opportunity. And there are certain things that actually empower liberty, empower freedom, empower prosperity and flourishing. And at the heart of it was education. And so that's why he was so critical. And, he was the one that founded those first textbooks and those first, focus around bringing people together and common learning and those foundational principles that would help everybody flourish and bring that liberty. And I think it's so appropriate in all of the turmoil that we're seeing in our country today. We need to cut through all the chaff and really focus again on what are those really core things that have been proven over time that are really worth keeping and are really worth passing on to the next generation. And, at the heart of it is learning and, understanding how to read and write, because, and do those basic things, having an accurate understanding of history, understanding both the good and bad of history, because, if we don't understand all of it, then, we're not well informed people. There's so many things we could go on and on over this, but I think, Noah Webster was widely known as the father of American education. Well, when the progressive movement started with, Horace Mann, and then, with others that were his students, then they kind of became, the founders of education, the modern education movement. But really, the truth is, Noah Webster was the one who charted that course, and then they took a deviation from it. And I think we need to look at these things and say, what is history telling us? And there are certain foundational things that we cannot throw away, because they are the things that really help us to flourish.
That's an awesome answer. And as a history major, it just made me really happy to hear that story brought to light. And much like we are today, in some ways, the colonies were very fragmented, right? So they were states, but they were founded by very different groups of people. You had the Puritans to the wealthy landowners, and so private colonies, and even New York wasn't founded by the British, and so it to unite them, his solution was education, and we see that repeat over and over again in history. If you educate people, you will make progress, right, as a society. And so as we made progress in the 60s and 70s with the civil rights movement, we ended up on the moon. So, it's an established kind of historical trend. So definitely a great namesake for sure from a historical standpoint. So as we wrap up here, let's talk about one last question, one last send off here for our audience. And you can expound on this how you want, but a starting point would be, what's one concrete goal that you have for the organization as a whole to continue to make an impact and to equip concerned citizens to reclaim education today?
Well, we can throw numbers around, and we do all the time in-house. But the one concrete goal I have for this organization is that we resource citizens with knowledge, information, and tools so that they are equipped to bring about change where they are. We can't be everywhere, but our listeners are all over this country. Some of them are in big cities. Some of them are very rural communities. The issues vary from location to location, but in every community, citizens have their concerns. They want to see things get better. And if we can, based on principles and based on understanding of systems, particularly the educational systems and educational policy, and what is and what can be, and the leadership structures and all of those things, if we're able to help inform citizens so that they can put their hands around that, their hearts, their minds around that, and they can say, okay, now I know where I fit in. I know how I can connect the dots where I am and help bring about the changes we need here. That is always going to be our number one priority. That has to be our number one goal, because when the citizens are empowered to make things better, they will get better. And it won't be just based on the next election cycle. It's going to be based on the communities who live there and will continually work toward making things better for their own families, for their own communities. And at the end of the day, that's what makes a great country.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. Could not agree more. Because whether we're happy with a president or not, and that's going to change, right? So half the time, half the nation's going to be disappointed, right? And so, but we don't have to wait. We can make change. Or even if we are happy with the administration, we can still make change. And when people are equipped to make change school by school and district by district, that's how we improve individual kids' lives. And as someone with a background as an educator, that is what I am most passionate about. And I think it is safe to say that we as an organization and as individuals within an organization are passionate about is each child. And so while broad reforms are great and can be very helpful, when we are equipped and when we choose to be empowered, when our audience, us as individuals and audience members, when we choose to accept responsibility and empower ourselves and go out and create that change, we can begin to see, that change on an individual level. Thank you for listening today to our birthday episode. If you would like to give us a little present, please visit NWEF.org to donate. And we would also love to interact with you on social media. So if you have thoughts on this episode or just want to get some more cool stories from Melvin, please follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We look forward to seeing you there.